Hello, my name is Jessica Lewis, and I'm the Director of Early Supports and Services at Community Partners. We are the Birth to Three early intervention program that covers Stratford County, and we cover birth to three services for children with developmental needs or who are at risk for having a developmental delay. And today I'm here to talk to you about starting strong and what early habits are most important to prioritize when raising your child so that they can grow up happy and healthy. When we think about early education as we become parents or transition to parenthood, there's not a lot of education that is available before parents have their first child. We have those wonderful books of what to expect when you're expecting. You can go and take a labor and delivery class. But a lot of parents feel like the day they come home from the hospital, they're sort of amazed that someone let them leave with this little baby. And the educational opportunities for families after they've brought their little one home are really not all that much. You could join a new parent group. If you're having some feeding difficulties, you can consult with a lactation consultant. Some families are fortunate enough to be able to work with a doula who will guide them through those early days. But then there are other programs that are designed to help support parents into their transition with parenthood. And these would include programs like Healthy Families America, Early Head Start, and Early Supports and Services, which is our program. But there are also your pediatricians and your daycare providers who provide education to families. But often in the moment, they're troubleshooting what's hard instead of thinking about the bigger picture and how to support children as they grow. So that's what we'll talk about today. To me, when I think about supporting children's development, there's really four pillars that we want to be talking about. Sleep and eating are the most important, and it's sort of like chicken and egg. Which is more important, the sleep or the feeding? When we're sleep deprived, we're less likely to think about our nutrition and we're more impulsive to pick quick and easy choices. If we're not eating healthy, our sleep becomes poor. So it's sort of hard to know which is feeding into which, but those two are really essential. The other two pillars to me that are equally important are play and movement and our attachment and social engagement. And I don't think that those get the same level of attention. So we'll spend some time today thinking about each of these four pillars, what happens if our pillars are shaky, and what we can do to try to get back on track. So I started with sleep thinking that most of us need our sleep first. And that's the hardest part of that transition when you first bring your little baby home. So I thought it might be helpful to give families some visuals of this is what you can expect generally for wake and sleep windows. Those first couple of months are just pure chaos. Get sleep when you can, sleep when the baby sleeps. But as they get older, getting onto a schedule is really important. And to live by that schedule will help you and your child find success. To me, what we call sleep hygiene is really essential. And what we do for our sleep environment, for our routines, and how we think about our taking care of our sleep. We think about our physical hygiene and showering and taking care of our body, making sure we're not stinky. But the way we care for our sleep and protect our sleep is just as important. So, as with everything I'll say today, consistency is the most important thing you can do for your child. You want to pick a bedtime routine that works for your family and is successful, something you can achieve for your family, and you want to stick to it. For some families that have time and luxury, drawing out that bedtime routine and having a bath and reading some books, having a last little bit of playtime and a snuggle in your jammies, that's wonderful. But if you are a home with working full-time caregivers, you're going to have to think about how do you prioritize that routine and try to maintain that routine with caregivers who may be coming and going from there. But what I really think is important is limiting screen time before bed, watching TV to fall asleep. There's that blue light component that we hear a lot of researchers talking about, but it's also distracting our brains and it's not allowing us to work on the self-regulation skills that we really foundationally need in order to be able to put ourselves to sleep. So I'm not a big fan of the screen on at bedtime. I want kids to develop skills to get themselves to sleep. So, think about having some time changing into your jammies, quick little cuddles or snuggles. And this is really about the adult's approach to bedtime. And we really want to think as caregivers, I know it's hard, we're tired, we're exhausted, we've done a whole day of either caring for kids, working, whatever it is that we may be navigating. And generally, our bandwidth heading into bedtime is pretty narrow. And we're frustrated. We just want them to go to bed so that we can have our time and we can go to bed. But this is a really important time to think about your own regulation and your own place and state. So, what I'll say to families is think about an adult timeout or think about an adult activity that would help you be really regulated heading into that bedtime routine. We want to be our calmest selves, because so many children feed off of what we bring to the routine, what our energy level is. And if you're in there and you're saying, it's time to go to bed, we just need to go to bed, you need to lay down and go to sleep, that's not going to help your child calm down. What we want is that slow, low, calm voice. We want to rock to our little ones. Pick a song that you sing every night. Could be ABCs, could be Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I know growing up, my dad was not the kind of guy to do that, so he sang me college drinking songs. But as long as it was in the right tone and routine, it helped me settle for bed. So you pick what works for you, but just make sure that your tone and your approach at bedtime is really calm. We also want to think about what helps kiddos calm down. Some kiddos love bath time, and that can be really soothing as it sort of simulates for the child what the experience was in the womb. If their womb experience was a really positive one, that bath time is kind of like being back in the, you know, in the amniotic sac and in that water. It's calming, it's regulating. For some kiddos, that was not a calming experience. So maybe it's finding a cozy blanket and having some snuggles, having your last bottle or, you know, sippy cup of the night, brushing our teeth and getting settled for bed. We also want to think about our sleep environments. And again, you know, this is where your consistency is. If you're a family that travels or you know you're going to be traveling, you want to make it so that your bedtime environment is something you can transfer between settings. So when my kids were little, we used the same white noise sound for sleep. And as long as we were able to transport that sound with us, my kids slept really well everywhere. And you want to have the room dark. And while this top picture here looks really fun, and that's a really cool bedroom, if I went to bed in there, I'm not going to want to sleep. I'm going to want to go play with all those toys. This picture down here on the bottom where it shows there's not a lot of distractions in the bedroom. It's really pretty simple, not a lot of toys, not a lot for the kiddo to look at. They're going to be more likely to settle to sleep because that's not where they do their playing. So that's another piece of this to think about. It's great to store toys or have a play space in the kids' bedroom, but if they're constantly playing with their bed, getting in and out of their bed, we don't want that. What we want is their bed to be a cue that that's a place for sleep. When we get into our bed, that's where we go to sleep. And similar for adults. So your bed should really be where you're going to rest your head at night. And this is a consistent message from all sleep experts that we need to be thinking about our bed, not as a place to watch TV or sit down and eat our dinner, but just as a place to sleep. So those are things to think about. I am a big fan of if your kiddo is asleep, you don't wake them up. Never wake a sleeping baby. And I know there's a lot of doctors, particularly when families first come home from the hospital, that want you to wake your child up for feedings. And that tends to lead to patterns and behaviors that can be challenging. Kiddos should be getting the bulk of their caloric intake during the day and not at night. If they learn to depend on getting some of their calories at night or drinking bottles to soothe, that can mean that you get into a habit of getting up and getting bottles several times a night, and that is not good for anybody's sleep. There's a lot of different factors and research out there about co-sleeping. It really depends family to family what works best, but just thinking about those patterns and routines that you start establishing with your child, and are those sustainable in the long run? So there are always places you can go to talk about sleep and sleep habits and co-sleeping versus separate sleeping, but safe sleep is always best. We want to try to make sure that kids, and especially our littlest babes, don't have anything else near them, so that way should they move in their sleep, that they can continue to breathe. As with all things, we know that there are hiccups. What I would say is when hiccups happen for you, you want to make sure you have a plan before you go to bedtime. You don't want to wait till you're tired, because none of us are our best selves when we're tired. So make sure that you and whoever else is helping care for the child are on the same page before you go to bed, what you're going to do to handle those middle of the night wake ups. It's totally normal for kiddos to have changes in sleeping routines around growth spurts, you know, those first couple of months, right? So 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, 12 months, those are all kind of typical sleep regression windows. But also things like my kiddo was really sick and they just needed to be close to me, or we had this big change in our family dynamic and our child really needed to be close to us. Those are all totally normal. Just be clear in your mind what your goal is and how you want to get to that goal. When you think about changing sleep routines, particularly when families are thinking, okay, I want to transition my babe from a bassinet to a crib or from a crib to a toddler bed, explore making those changes during the day, during nap times, so you're less likely to disrupt your own sleep. We want to protect our own sleep so that we can be our best caregiver selves. So, try to make those changes during nap time. If it goes great, transition it to bedtime. If it's not going great, keep trying during the day before you try at night and compromise your own rest. I did think it was important to bring up the phase of purple crying. Not everybody is educated on the phase of purple crying, including myself. And so when my first went through the purple crying phase, we had no idea what was going on. And I was really grateful for the nurse who took the time to explain this to me. So the purple crying phase is something that most children go through between 2 and 3 months of age, where they're just almost impossible to soothe. And this phase happens for several reasons, but please know it's a phase. It's very normal to be really challenged to soothe your child through that period of time. There's a lot that's changing in their body and brain, and we want to just be as patient and consistent as we can be. Take turns. If you need a break, put your child down in a safe place, walk away, go get some fresh air. I'm a big fan of stepping outside where you'll get a break from the noise, and the fresh air can be really helpful for yourself. But make sure you're communicating with your pediatrician that this is happening for you, and hopefully they'll have some good strategies. If not, please reach out and we're happy to help. The next part of that pillars that we were talking about is the feeding development. So I think it's important to go back to the beginning and think about, I love this visual image of how fast a child's stomach grows. So when they're bitty babes, they're only taking tiny little sips. For those first couple of weeks, feeding is reflexive. So they automatically know how to eat, but that changes within a couple of weeks, and they have to learn how to eat. So there's usually a phase when they can kind of latch onto the bottle and sleep and keep drinking. And then there's a phase where they have to learn to actively drink, and that often comes with coughing and choking and gagging, some difficulty with bottles. It's really important to make sure that your child is upright while you're giving them a bottle. While we want to have them all snuggled in and close, just make sure their head is a little higher on your arm and that your arm is tilted down a little bit. Because when we're laying back, gravity is more likely to encourage that liquid to go down into our lungs instead of into our belly. So if your baby is coughing, gagging, their voice sounds wet afterwards, sometimes watery eyes, are all signs that our liquids are getting into our lungs and not into our belly, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure that we're mindful that the digestive tract does really develop between 4 and 6 months or 4 and 6 weeks of age. Kind of similar to that purple crying phase, these things go together. Their digestive tract is changing, and it's quite often common for them to have gas bubbles and spit up. Their bowel movements often change during that. And this is where we start to learn about food allergies, food intolerances. This is something that's very important to communicate with your pediatrician about. If your child is excessively fussy, if they're spitting up, if their bowel movements are an atypical color. So for breastfed babies, their bowel movements should look kind of like yellow mustard seeds. And for formula fed babies, they're kind of a yellowy orange. And you're only putting liquid in, so it's liquid coming out. As you start to transition to solid food, those bowel movements will change, and it's it's a change. So be aware and know, and it's very common for children as they transition to solid foods that those solid foods smell. There's whole pieces of food that sometimes come out. But we want to make sure prior to transitioning to solid foods that we're giving them some non-food items to stimulate their mouth. Pacifiers, teethers, all those good baby things are fantastic, and we want to see kids putting that in their mouth on their own. So it should come with that bilateral coordination to hold something at midline and bring something to their mouth. We want them mouthing all kinds of different shapes and sizes of things. In particular, we want them to have long, narrow objects, because that's what gets back on the molars, or where the molars will grow in the back of the mouth. And the other big piece that changes as we transition to solid foods is the location of the gag reflex in the mouth. When we're first born, our gag reflex is located on the front third of our tongue. And through this phase of putting non-food items in our mouth or putting our hands in our mouth, we naturally move that gag reflex back to where it should be as an adult or as an older child, on the back third of your tongue. It's a survival mechanism. Kids very much should be gagging themselves. It's gross, but it's a very normal phase of development and part of what we consider signs of readiness for feeding. So we want them to be able to sit up on their own. We want them putting food or non-food or fingers in their mouths. And we want to think about what is their digestive tract looking like? Are we comfortable? Are we uncomfortable? Is it a child with reflux? We want to think about the allergen foods and the research around introducing, quote unquote, allergen foods. So peanut butter, eggs, certain fruits is really changing over time. And so it's kind of hard to predict where things stand. I would definitely consult with your pediatrician as you're introducing allergen foods, particularly if there's someone in your family who has a history of food allergies. There's lots of different products out there now on the market for different stages of feeding. You can go down the baby aisle and they'll show, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and you can certainly go through those. There's also been a huge movement, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years called baby-led weaning, and that is a really great approach of just following the baby's cues, having the baby with you while you're eating so the baby sees what you're eating. I know as polite society, we like to chew with our mouth closed because that's what we're supposed to do, but the only way your child is going to learn how to navigate food in their mouth is by watching you. So having the child near you while you're eating, chewing with your mouth open so they can see what you're doing, will help them understand as they start to get more interested what might be happening for them. The other thing that's really great for these littles is giving them a mirror or put your phone or tablet on selfie mode and have the child watch themselves while they're self-feeding or while they're doing some of this oral exploration with non-food items. That visual feedback can be really powerful because eating is one of the few things we do where we can't see what we're doing. And so being able to get some visual feedback can be really powerful. Generally, by a year, we want kids eating a decent amount of solid foods and a variety of solid foods. There's a lot of research around introducing vegetables first because they tend to be more neutral or bitter in flavor. And then the fruits come second because they're sweet. And where our taste buds are located in our mouths, your sweet taste buds are right on the front, and your salty and sour taste buds are located on the back sides of your tongues. Bitter is right in the middle. And we want to make sure that we're stimulating the whole palate. What I will say that's really interesting too is our tongues are regenerating cells and flavors. So if your child doesn't like something now, that doesn't mean that they won't like something in a few months. And the biggest thing you can do to mitigate the picky eating stage is introduce a huge amount of foods as early as possible so that when your child hits 18 months or that kind of typical picky eating phase, we want them to have a wide variety to choose from so that as they pull back foods, they're more likely to have more to choose from. Whereas if at 12 months, we're really only eating like 5 to 10 foods, if they start cutting those out, your window is going to be really small because as those toddlers develop those self-advocacy skills that we love them having and saying no and being able to refuse, that will also mean that they're refusing food because one of those most challenging things about toddlerhood is the lack of choice and volition that they have. They don't always control where they're going during the day. They don't control what they're wearing, so you can offer them choices. They don't control who's coming in and out of their lives or what demands we're placing on them, but they can choose what goes in their mouth. And so they will exercise that right to choose as much as they can. I do think that it's important to think about this is the current recommendations for a balanced nutrition diet. So fruits and vegetables, absolutely essential. Then we start to think about some whole grains, definitely those healthy fats. Avocados are great, nuts and seeds and beans. And as you see, as we get higher in the pyramid, those are kind of the easier foods, right? Our fast foods, our junk foods. Think about having a multivitamin every day for your child. Talk to your pediatrician about what types they recommend. I do think this is a really interesting graphic. It talks about some of us when we were kids and what we saw as the food pyramid then versus as nutrition and research has developed, what are we thinking about and prioritizing nowadays? So those fruits and vegetables right there at the bottom, those are really essential. To me, again, it comes back to those routines and consistency. Coming to the table regulated and calm is really important. I am a big fan of sitting at the table to eat. I know nowadays it's so easy. People take their food, they go sit down on the couch and they eat. They eat while they're watching TV, and it's kind of mindless eating. Are you even paying attention to what you're eating? Do you realize when you're full? You tend to lean toward those foods that are easier to eat, which are quite often more the junk foods. And the reality of the nutrition piece of things is the more whole a food is, the more nutrition there is. The more broke down a food is, the less nutrition is left. So pouches, smoothies, nice in theory because you think you're getting your fruits and vegetables in, but there's much less nutrition in them than the whole fruits or vegetables. So eating together at the table is a great place where you can model healthy eating, show your child that you're eating those variety of things. I don't recommend making 3 different meals, one for everybody. You make a meal for everybody, make sure that that meal includes something that you know your child will eat. And then, as in our house, we have a no thank you a plate. So the children have to try what's on their plate. And then if they want, they have their no thank you bite, and then they put it on there. And we keep coming back to foods again and again. And my kids have learned over the years that if they keep trying it, eventually they'll like it. There was a really cool research study that came out of Harvard University, I want to say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, that said it takes actually 10 times of trying a food to decide whether or not you really like it. So you can also think about what your child's reaction to the food is. If they immediately reject it as soon as they put it in their mouth, that's a texture response. They're responding to the way that that food feels in their mouth. If it takes them a couple of seconds before they decide whether or not they like something, that's a chemical response. That's about the taste, not the texture. So that's a way you can kind of tease things apart. We want to make sure that we're not distracting during mealtime. It's very easy to do that mindless eating, and we want to be really consistent and to think about what we're doing. When you eat out in the community, I think it's important to know what your priorities are. We're going to a birthday party or we're going to this special event. Know what's important to you and prioritize those, because your child is going to be stimulated by all that's going on around them, and they may or may not be willing to eat. This also is true for daycares. It can be really great to have the modeling that comes with eating at daycare in a community setting, and can bring some of that exposure. But there are also plenty of kiddos that are so distracted by their friends or their teachers or what's happening in the classroom while the children are eating that often they'll eat less there. So it can be great to come to daycare pickups or childcare pickups with a snack already, or when you first get home, usually they're pretty hungry and thirsty because they're finally feeling safe and relaxed and willing to start eating more. So as we've done before, kind of thinking about hiccups, picky eating is a very normal phase. Continue to offer a wide range of foods. Don't give up just because your child is saying no, but be consistent. I know that there were some articles when COVID first hit about people eating a ton of macaroni and cheese and picking those comfort foods. Totally normal, totally okay. But we want to think about, if we're sticking to those comfort foods, are we getting the right nutrition? Because unfortunately, the way our bodies work, if we're eating poor nutrition, we crave poor nutrition, and it doesn't build a healthy cycle. A body in motion stays in motion. Same with the food. If we're eating healthy, we continue to want to crave healthy foods. But if we're eating poorly, particularly things like zinc and iron, if we're not getting enough of those, it almost makes us crave the junk food more, which gets us into a really unhealthy cycle. So thinking about being calm and being consistent, just like with sleep, here with feeding, same message. Next, we're going to think about attachment and social development. This pyramid should look familiar for anybody who's taken kind of like a Psych 101 class, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But I like this one because this one's particularly designed for young children. And so we want to think about, when our babies are first born, the dysregulation that can come from birth, right? They're in this cozy, tucked in little warm sack where everything is, the sounds are muted, the light is muted, all the movement is sort of softened by being in the amniotic sac. And then they have this experience of coming into the world. Children who are able to have a vaginal delivery get that nice squeeze before they come out into the world, and that deep touch pressure of going through the birth canal is very calming before they have this large experience. Children who are delivered via C-section, it's a pretty stark change. They don't get that touch input, that big squeeze, because they're in there nice and warm and cozy, and then suddenly someone has opened their world, and now it's bright and cold and there's a lot happening. And so thinking about those first moments, we recommend, right, skin to skin and snuggles. And this is where our attachments start. And it's really important as adults, again, in those same ways about feeding and sleeping, being calm, being steady, being consistent. But those early attachments really set our foundation for what to expect in our world. When we're in mom's belly, we have access to food and nutrition, we're getting fresh oxygen, all of that regularly. But once we come out, we have to work on navigating all of that. And so those first couple of days are a lot, and our babes sleep a lot as they're trying to recover from this experience. So it's really important as adults that we provide as much co-regulation as possible. And for NICU babes, or for babes who spend an extended time in the hospital, this can kind of lead to two different reactions. We either see babes who shut down and are kind of sleepy and can't tolerate the environment, so they just stay asleep a lot, and then we have babes who just cry and cry and cry. So it could go both ways, but those first days at home should be really calming as we start to settle in. We want to make sure that we're providing positive social interactions from a really young age. They're even in utero, right? They're hearing us. So if we're arguing with our partner or the people who are around us, they pick up on that really from the very beginning. So we want to model good social interactions. We want to model what we expect of them. Communication skills. Talk to your little one, even when they're only a couple of days old. Okay, I'm going to change your diaper now. We're going to undo the diaper and it's going to be so cold, but don't worry, we're going to wrap you back up and you're going to be warm soon. And we want to make sure that we're building trust and we're connecting with our littles, putting them down and going back to your phone. Your child's missing those windows. And so it's so important to take care of ourselves, being aware of how we feel postpartum, whether we're feeling anxious or sad. Make sure you're communicating that to your provider because we know when parents are experiencing those emotions, one, they're totally valid and normal. The hormonal changes that come with birth are just massive. So communicate with your provider what supports you might need so that they can help you because those early interactions with your child are setting up a foundation for hopefully a successful relationship. When we feel like our caregivers are hearing us, responding to our cues, meeting our needs, we feel safe and can start to grow and develop. But if we're not sure when our next meal is going to come, when someone might hold us, if someone's going to follow their cues, it's very hard for children to regulate. And if they're not regulated, they're not going to move on to other developmental skills. We really want to keep that social connection with our littles and respond to their cues as much as we can. Hiccups come, we know they happen. We all have our moments where we feel like we're not a good parent, not a good caregiver. Totally normal. We all have bad days. But to me, the biggest part is what we call rupture and repair. Step up and own it. I had a really hard day at work, or somebody cut me off in traffic. I was feeling really upset and I yelled at you. I'm sorry that I yelled at you. Own your mistake and apologize for your mistake. I did not mean to yell at you because they think that they've done something wrong and then they don't understand. As they get older, they'll understand you're yelling at me, but I didn't do anything wrong. So we want to make sure that we're communicating openly and honestly with our kiddos, what's happening around them and what's leading to our reactions. So we know that there's all kind of family attachment disruptions that happen, whether there's a caregiver who's traveling or a caregiver who's incarcerated, or maybe parents are separating, but just make sure you stay in touch. Find different ways to connect with your child and communicate with them about this. Mommy really misses you when she has to go to work, but I have to work so that we have money for food on the table and a roof over our head. Tell your littles that. They may not understand all the complexities, so try to keep it at an age appropriate level, but that communication allows them to feel like it's safe to talk about those things and that it's okay that not everything goes perfectly. So we want to avoid that. We don't want to place blame. Caregivers who blame each other, the child then learns that it's okay to blame others for their own shortcomings, and that's not what we want. We want to teach them to kind of own their own mistakes as much as possible. And then find little moments where you can really treasure the moment with your child. So there's a lot of nights that I end up working late, but bedtime is always our time. I'll stop, we have a snuggle, we have some time together. Tell me about your day. In our house, we do what we call roses and thorns. The rose is the best part of your day or something that made you happy today. And thorns are those moments where maybe things didn't go ideal and we can do some kind of verbal problem solving. Okay, what could we do next time? Or that didn't feel good. How can we work to make that feel better for you? The other piece of this is making sure you look at your child. Scrolling on your phone while your child is talking is not giving them the feedback that you're really listening. And the best gift that we can give each other as humans in our interactions is presence. Putting down our phone, turning the TV off, and just sitting and being together. It's such a gift and it's such a small thing we can do for each other, but it doesn't matter what your educational background is. It doesn't matter how much money you make or where you live. If you're sitting and present and connecting with your child, you're going to develop a really powerful relationship. And your child is going to know that when they come to you for things, that you're going to listen. And that's really, really important, especially as they grow up. To me, a missing piece we don't talk about enough, but there have been champions of this in the past. Michelle Obama is a great example, right? Get out and play. ESPN has their Play 60 campaign. This is so important. We need to get out and we need to be moving our body. Movement in general stimulates all those feel-good hormones in our brain. For anybody who's battled depression and spoken with a therapist or a provider about this, we know that when we exercise and when we move our body, these endorphins are released and we naturally feel better. the input that we get from moving our body also provides regulating inputs. So running, walking, climbing, do whatever feels good for you, but get your body moving. Pacing inside all day does not count. It's not the same as, putting a bunch of, put a pile of pillows in the middle of the floor and climb on top of them. Get outside and just run in the driveway, or run in, whatever patch of grass you can find. It also helps burn off nutrients and then makes your body hungry. So it's building a good exercise, feeding, sleep cycle that we really want. And this is how we build strength and coordination. We learn to move our bodies by having this free space. So as little babes, make sure, please put them on the floor. Let them learn to navigate their environments. Putting kids in devices or expecting them to sit down and giving them a device to keep them still and quiet is not going to create a positive feedback cycle for supporting their emotional development, supporting their physical development, and it's certainly not going to support their cognitive development. Children need to be bored in order to learn how to adapt and how to problem solve. If we're constantly solving problems for them or keeping them entertained, they're not going to learn how to do things on their own. And so letting them just simply play outside is so therapeutic and something we can do anywhere we are. So we want to make sure that we're building in opportunities to help us learn. For littles, go outside and label what you see. There's clouds, there's grass, there's dirt, there's rocks, there's mud, there's asphalt, and see where they are. Just keep it fun, keep it light, make it playful, play tag, play hide and seek. We want to make sure that we're doing some open-ended things like dramatic play or silly play. You can run a restaurant, take some of your groceries out of the pantry, and you can run a pretend restaurant. Or, if you're outside and you're playing in the dirt, we could take our trucks and we could do, have some digging or some building. My biggest strategy for keeping kiddos regulated while playing is building in rhythm and movement. So, even when you're transitioning in the house, the ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. And that marching and the rhythmic singing is very regulating and can really help support kiddos through transition. And getting outside and moving also brings wonderful social opportunities to support social skill development. So even if you live in an apartment building in a more urban area, getting outside, finding a playground or a park where there's other kiddos can be fantastic for kids to learn how to interact with each other, learn how to share, learn how to take turns. How do you communicate with your peers around you? And again, as adults, it's really our responsibility to model those healthy behaviors. As we all know, again, there's always hiccups. Sometimes it's limited space. There are some great online yoga videos. Cosmic Kids is a YouTube channel. That's one of my favorites. She does some really great storytelling through yoga that can be good with kids. Again, I'm a big fan of songs with movement. There are lots of songs with movements, right? If you're happy and clap your hands. We want to build in those heavy work activities, and this can be really positive for a child's social emotional development. Have them be your helper around the house. Move the laundry from the washer to the dryer or out of the dryer into the basket. Can they help unload the dishwasher? Pick those kinds of activities that your child can successfully help with, and they're going to feel good because they're helping you, so they're getting positive feedback, but they're also getting some of that heavy work, that physical work in during that time. One of my favorite little kid activities was my kids would take turns sitting in a laundry basket, and the other kid would either push or pull them around the hall or around the kitchen table, and that built in a lot of fun time. Even if you only have a couple of minutes, build it in, get it up, get your bodies moving. Roughhouse play. There's a whole book called The Art of Roughhousing that can be really great, even if you only have a couple of minutes. It releases those endorphins. It can build some positive attachments. You can certainly play games in the car. Oh, I see a dog. Can you find a dog? Or I see a plane. You're teaching your kids language, you're building in social skills. And for those who it doesn't come naturally, this is what Google is for. You can Google some play ideas. There's some great apps, the CDC Milestone app or the Pathways app. Both have some great play activities based on your child's age. I'm not a huge fan of their developmental milestones. I would say that when they adjusted them a few years ago, they adjusted them in the wrong direction. They took out crawling as an essential phase. As an occupational therapist, I implore you for your kid to crawl. It's the only time in our life we really build solid shoulder stability because we're down on our hands. So any kind of shoulder work will be great for fine motor skills down the line, handwriting, manipulating buttons, some of those things. But again, it comes back to being present and being with your child. So when we think about all of these things, if a pillar is shaky, things things tend to get a little messy. And I thought of some specific examples, right? So if you're not sleeping well, you tend to be impulsive. I need a coffee, I need this. And you go for those easy, quick answers. And that can take away from the quality of the food or the quality of our interactions. We all know that as we've moved toward more fast food and more processed foods, we're having more physical health ailments. And we know that it's impacting our sleep. We know that it's impacting how we feel psychologically. So it's important as much as we can to get back to those whole fruits and vegetables. The COVID pandemic was a really good test case for the importance of socializing and getting outside. Especially, I think about those first few weeks when so many of us were so scared and we were trapped inside, and what that did for our mental health. Living in a place of fear and lack of social engagement really hurt us in our mental health and our physical health too. So while it was good for controlling the spread of the disease, we all know that we suffered through the COVID pandemic, and it just shows us the importance of social engagement. And social media does not count as social engagement. Social engagement is face to face with somebody, having a conversation, or even over the phone, at least having those conversations so that we don't feel so alone, so that we can feel grounded in each other's presence, and that we can be just there together and living together. I think these technology advancements have really shaken some of our pillars, and we need to get back to those strong foundations. So if I want to break this down into like a single takeaway message, prioritize sleep. Save yourself the sleep. So, you know, as adults, we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Plan ahead so that you can get that time. Plan ahead for meals and think about when you go grocery shopping, what it is you can buy that will feed your body what it needs and what it's craving. Make sure you're getting some connecting time. So if every day you're getting some sleep, you're eating at least one really good meal. Toddlers and little kids only need one really good meal a day. So don't beat yourself over the head if you're not getting 3 solid meals in. Take time to connect with others. Take time to ask someone how they're doing. Allow somebody to hear how you're really doing. That social connection is so important. And just get up and move your body. To me, it feels like these are 4 kind of manageable things to do in the chaos of our world right now, with the balance of work and home and family and all those stressors. And my contact information is here. So if you have any questions or follow-up thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this. I am grateful for you all, and I wish you all a great day. I don't know how to stop this. Oop, there we go.